Hello, I'm Esther Gidui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, August 16th. This is Africa 54.
Russian President Vladimir Putin speaks to Mali's military leader about the coup in Niger as Nigerians call for the mass recruitment of volunteers and the junta faces a possible ECOWAS invasion. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is indicted in connection with efforts to overturn his 2020 election defeat. We'll have a report. And in our technology report, a Ghanaian banker leaves her corporate job to launch an after-school center in Accra, where children learn coding and robotics. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
Nigerian citizens are preparing for a possible invasion by countries in the region 3 weeks after mutinous soldiers ousted the nation's democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum in a coup. Regional tensions are deepening as the stalemate between Niger and ECOWAS shows no signs of softening. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has spoken to Mali's military leader about the coup in Niger. Olivia Zolino has more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke with Mali's military leader in a phone call on Tuesday about the recent coup in Niger. That's according to a social media post from Mali's interim president, posted on social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter. The call adds to growing fears from the West over Russia's influence in Western Africa. Niger has strategic significance for the United States, China, Europe, and Russia, and has served as a hub for foreign forces fighting a regional Islamist insurgency. It also has a wealth of uranium and oil resources. In a statement, the Kremlin said the call was initiated by Mali and was focused on ending the situation, quote, through peaceful, political, and diplomatic means. As the West loses influence in the region, support for Russia has grown. Since President Mohamed Bazoum was ousted in late July, coup supporters have been seen at rallies, waving Russian flags. Military leaders in Mali and Burkina Faso have kicked out troops from former colonial power France, while strengthening ties with Moscow. Under Bazoum, Niger remained a Western ally. The US, France, Germany, and Italy have troops stationed there under agreements with the now deposed civilian government. Putin has called for a return to constitutional order in Niger, while Wagner's chief has welcomed the army takeover and offered his services.
That was Olivia Zolino of Reuters reporting. 4 months into the conflict in Sudan, the United Nations is warning that millions of people are running out of food and some are dying due to lack of health care. The situation is causing huge humanitarian crisis. The World Health Organization says the conflict has had devastating impacts on people's lives, health, and well-being. Margaret Harris, spokeswoman for the WHO, told journalists in Geneva that about 67% of hospitals in the affected areas are out of service. There have been 53 attacks on healthcare workers, which has killed 11 people. Meantime, Sudan is also seeing continuous outbreaks of measles, malaria, and dengue, and about 1/3 of Sudanese kids under 5 years old are suffering long-term malnutrition. 40 members of a Zimbabwe opposition coalition were arrested Tuesday by the police while actively campaigning for the upcoming elections. The incident occurred in the Glenview suburb of Harare. The coalition members were detained for engaging in activities not initially mentioned in their notification for a rally in that suburb, according to the police. The opposition had previously urged the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to address the issue of police interference that disrupts their rallies. VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke to Chipo Dendere, Assistant Professor of Africana Studies at Wellesley College in Massachusetts, about the politics in Zimbabwe.
Ruling party, I think, has worked very hard to close political space. It's different, it's not 2008 levels of violence that we've seen in the past, But it's the jailing of opponents. It's that Job Sikalai has been in prison for over a year now, who's one of the top opposition candidates. It's that journalists don't feel like they can report information. It's that, even though the opposition is having these big rallies, most of their rallies have actually been banned. It's that the opposition, when they signed up their candidates, there are quite a large proportion of candidates being told that they're not eligible to participate. So it's these small ways where I think a lot of people were hoping that in the post-Mugabe era, there would be more democratization, there would be more opening of political space, but we're seeing that political space is pretty closed. And for some reason, that the ruling party seems concerned that they cannot win in a free and fair election.
So could we see a scenario where, even though they are worried, on the surface, but they are rest assured that when it comes to election night, they are going to come out victorious?
There have been a lot of questions for the ZAC, which is the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, where people feel they are not confident. ZAC has refused to release a copy of what the ballot will look like. They've refused to give a digital copy of the voters' roll. In the country, voter registration was not a clear-cut process. They closed a lot of voter registration centers. Some research that we did was showing that people would have to travel 10 kilometers just to be able to register to vote, which means that a lot of people simply weren't able to do it. A lot of young people didn't have the funds to go and register to vote. So those are all voters that are disenfranchised. The most important thing is that it should be peaceful. It should be peaceful for the observers so that the observers are not denied right to enter into Zimbabwe. It should be peaceful for voters so that people are not intimidated. There is no violence. Ask the Zimbabwean government to promise that there will be peace next week, that we will not see a harassment of Nelson Chamisa and his party and other opposition leaders. We will not see a harassment of rural voters, of urban voters, and we will not see a harassment of people that are coming into the country to observe the elections. All of those things are critical for Zimbabwe to do better.
Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you, Paul.
That was Chipo Dendere, an assistant professor of Africana Studies at Wellesley College, speaking with VOA's Pondiho from South Africa. Africa's abundant supply of vast minerals and raw materials could turn the continent into a global supplier of raw materials, according to a report released on Wednesday by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. The report says the continent has undeniable natural resources to benefit its workforce. Earlier, I spoke to Paul Akiwumi, director of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development Division on Africa, least developed countries and special programs, and began by asking him how Africa can tap into its vast natural resources.
Well, I think it's an opportune time now. What has happened is that the global supply chains have been disrupted through the COVID pandemic and other international events going on. And it's very clear that the multinational firms need to diversify their supply chains. So they have been given incentives to come back to their countries, and they are looking to diversify everywhere else in the world. And this is an opportune time for Africa to show that they have the potential to enter into these global supply chains. And they do have the potential because of three main factors. One is that they have the youth, the geographic dividend, and this is also high-skilled youth, tech-savvy youth. Secondly, they have the natural resources. And when we talk about natural resources, we're talking about the critical minerals that are required for the new energy transition. And thirdly, they have the ability to scale things up because of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So the opportunities are there and the potential is there.
How do African leaders make sure that the youth of Africa are part and parcel of what is happening in their countries?
Well, the key thing here is that when we're talking about the critical minerals and the supply chains that we're talking about high-end supply chains, so knowledge-intensive supply chain. So this is auto manufacturing, this is the ICT industry, this is pharmaceuticals as well. And this is also the energy sector, developing of new energy sector. So the key thing here is that African governments must ensure that they add value in their continents. I'll give you an example. You know, Africa has about 47% of the cobalt and manganese, which is needed for the green tech transfer into green tech energy. And the fact is that the cobalt is mined and raw materials is sent to another continent to be processed. There's no reason why it cannot be processed in Africa. There's no reason why the second tier 2 products cannot be produced, which are components for car manufacturing and so on and so forth. And there's no reason why they cannot assemble the whole thing together. We're talking about the Airbus model, where different parts are made in different countries throughout Europe, and then they're put together. This is the same thing that can happen in Africa, because the African Continental Free Trade Area strives to have zero tariffs across the continent. So it's about the skills and clustering of skills in various parts of Africa. And this is the youth who are the ones who are the tech-savvy ones. I'll just add also, there are over 700 innovation labs in Africa today, and they're just growing. So there's a lot of potential there.
Did you find any gaps in your research and missing links, and how can this be addressed?
You see, the issue here, that I think it's a global issue, that it is the investor side as well as the government side. And unfortunately, Africa has not been getting a good deal with regard to contracts being signed by multinational firms to use their minerals or exploit their minerals. And this is an opportunity now to be able to get better contracts and better deals. But also on the other side, it's important for the multinational firms because they need to diversify their supply chains. So they need to go somewhere else. So this report actually serves as a sales pitch for the African governments as well to the multinational firms, because it's in their benefit to have diversified supply chains. So if another global shock happens, they have different places to get the supply chains from. So it is in everybody's mutual interest to move forward along those lines. And I believe, and I have the optimism to believe, that this will start taking place. And if you've had an opportunity to look at our report, you'll see on page 90, figure 21, that it clearly indicates what the capabilities of Africa in different countries, from the processing of raw materials to the tier 2, which is components, to tier 1, which is actually assembling and putting parts together. So this is very critical, and this is evidence on the ground which business people and multinational firms will see and take advantage of.
That was Paul Akiwumi, Director of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development Division on Africa, Least Developed Countries and Special Programs, speaking to me earlier. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been indicted along with 18 others in connection with efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain has the latest.
Many Americans stayed up late Monday night to see and hear Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis detail the charges in a 97-page indictment against former President Donald Trump and 18 others.
A Fulton County grand jury returned a true bill of indictment, charging 19 individuals with violations of Georgia law arising from a criminal conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election in this state.
Willis gave Trump and the other defendants until noon on Friday, August 25th, to turn themselves in to the court. One expert told VOA that because Willis got indictments on racketeering or RICO charges, all 19 charged will be linked together as one group.
And that, in many ways, is not great if you're at the top of that food chain in some respects, because it gives an incentive for people to provide evidence and to make deals to your detriment.
For his part, former President Donald Trump blasted the indictments on social media, proclaiming his innocence and describing DA Willis as out of control and very corrupt. Trump said he would hold a news conference Monday to present a report on what he termed the presidential election fraud that he says took place in Georgia. Some 60 court rulings in multiple states found Trump's claims of election fraud in the 2020 presidential election lacked standing or merit. Trump remains the clear frontrunner in the race for the Republican nomination for the 2024 presidential election, with other candidates reluctant to call him out for denying that Biden won in 2020. One expert tells VOA this denial of the 2020 election results is truly unprecedented.
And the problem here, as in all societies, is once you break down a barrier and set a precedent, no matter how bad the precedent is, it's so much easier to have it done again and again and again. And that's Donald Trump's real legacy to American democracy. He has weakened it and undermined it.
One voter at the Iowa State Fair told VOA he was going to await the verdicts before judging Trump.
But I do know this, until he's been judged guilty by a jury of his peers, he's innocent. That's America.
Trump is seeking to delay the trials until after the November 2024 elections. Willis is seeking a trial in Georgia within the next 6 months. Trump is also facing trials in New York, Washington, and Florida. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, overcoming a language barrier poses a challenge for refugees in Kenya. We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, in Zimbabwe and Gabon, voters are preparing for next week's elections. In Zimbabwe, the youth want jobs and security amid economic chaos. In Gabon, President Ali Bongo says he is, quote, more ready than ever for a third term. Join me, Haiti Adams, as we discuss the elections in Zimbabwe and Gabon on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, Algeria's Ministry of Culture and Arts has ordered all cinemas to stop showing the film Barbie almost a month after it opened in the North African country. Neither the ministry nor the Algerian Audio-Visual Regulatory Authority commented on the report or directive provided for a rationale to take that action. Human rights campaigners are urging Tanzania to release 3 people, including a former legislator, saying they could face treason charges for criticizing a deal with Emirati company to manage the country's ports. The 3 were arrested last weekend after publicly criticizing the ports deal signed last October by President Samia Suluhu Hassan. And Malian music star Salif Keita, 73, is now a special advisor to the head of the West African nation's military junta. Keita was appointed by decree to advise Colonel Assimi Goita, the head of the junta. Keita has pledged his allegiance to the military government and says he will always remain a friend of Mali's soldiers. Many refugees living in Nairobi speak neither English nor Swahili, the 2 most common languages in Kenya. This communications barrier poses a challenge as they try to integrate into society. Huba Abdi has more from Nairobi in this report narrated by Salem Solomon.
Masajid Saif al-Din escaped from war and violence in Sudan. The Sudanese journalist was forced to seek refuge in Kenya.
I came here through Ethiopia after the outbreak of war in my country. Seriously, I had a lot of problems before reaching here. My trip is very long. With start from Al-Kamlin, Ethiopia to Gondar and Addis, and after that from here.
Saif al-Din and many other refugees who live in Nairobi struggle to speak or write in English or Swahili. Saif al-Din has enrolled in English language courses at Maarifa College, a higher learning institute in the Kenyan capital that helps refugees and locals learn different languages.
Very difficult because all people talk Swahili and English. As for the culture in Sudan, just I talk about Arabic, not English. Just I'm here in Maarifa College. I learn to talk English here.
Tyrese Yusuf, a Somali refugee, faces a similar problem. Now he must learn English and Swahili in a short period of time to survive in Nairobi.
When I came here, it was difficult for me English, but I started to listening, hiking, and then I feel improved. How can I talk English?
Mary Nyakowa, a teacher at Maarifa College, says the language barrier makes many of her students feel isolated and hopeless.
We teach them how to speak, but we also give them moral values, moral support, so they understand when you are out there how you're supposed to conduct yourself as a refugee. One thing that we do here is after 3 months, we normally have different programs, and one of them is to teach them their rights as refugees.
Providing inclusive education to refugees can be a challenging task. Obstacles include the availability of schools, classrooms, and teachers in host communities. Salome Tera is the director of adult education in Nairobi County.
They should be given an education in English and Swahili so they can live and speak to people here. We should understand the problem they have.
Among Kenyan citizens.
The language barrier is just one of the challenges refugees face in Kenya. For Huwa Abdi, Nairobi, Kenya, Salim Solomon, VOA News.
Now to West Africa, where Ghanaian banker Thelma Tago quit her corporate job in one of Africa's premier banks to launch an after-school center in Accra, where children can learn coding and robotics while having fun. Our technology correspondent Paul Ndiho spoke to Tago. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther. The Learn and Play Center fosters critical thinking, problem solving, and creative of young children. It also encourages them to become future innovators by providing a holistic learning experience, building a vibrant community, and shaping their future through technology.
Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul.
When I was doing my research about some of the work that you do and talking to some people who know you, they told me you are doing some amazing stuff with kids. You're trying to change a community. You're trying to empower young people. What is it that you do?
I was a banker for many years. And whilst I was a banker, I realized when we have meetings with the international community that it seems like we tend to freeze or we are not able to express ourselves as eloquently. So when I decided to leave the bank and set up my own business, I sort of wanted to find out where I can actually contribute more because of my experience and what I want to do in life. I started off with my own child. I have a toddler. And what I realized was Africa can actually grow organically if we begin to change their mindsets. We have been sort of ingrained in ourselves the culture of respect of an adult. In Africa, we show respect by not being too proactive, too assertive. And because of that cultural nuance, it stops us from actually being ourselves in such important meetings when we meet the Western community. So I decided to set up this place. It's supposed to be an after-school place initially, just for the kids to come, so that I can somehow have a way of impacting them to be able to see the world a little more differently, a little more holistically. But then when I started, and I started the classes, we started with STEM programs, I realized the kids were beginning to become more of themselves. So then I introduced a little more. So we went into toddler coding and robotics, and it was like a new day for them. It was so amazing to see how their eyes sparkled, and by the third, fourth classes, they were like a different person. So then we invested more in that area.
I like the fact that you are introducing these skills to young people. When we come out here, we find ourselves in situations where we can't compete And yet we have, sometimes you have the education, but you cannot compete with the rest of your colleagues. You cannot express yourself. To your point, I think that's a great thing that you are trying to do. How has the response been like?
It's been amazing. So the immediate thing the parents tend to see with their kids is that their confidence level just shoots up. So I recall a parent come to me, I think on the third class of her child. She had come to us and complained that her child is very quiet in class. She doesn't like responding when they ask questions in class, and she's naturally too, I don't want to use the word timid, but really just reserved. By the third class fall, this young girl would stand in front of the class and she wants to lead the class. And so her mom came and said, what are we doing? Because her teachers from school are asking, my child has completely changed. What is going on? And we haven't done anything differently. She's just excited about robotics. She's excited about everything that she's able to do in class. Because we make them disassemble the robots themselves, then they program them and they reassemble them. And when they see the robots acting, it's as if something in them clicks. And so they themselves now feel comfortable sharing and getting excited with others. We invested a lot in the tools. So every child has access to a robot, a tablet, and what to use. So it's not where you go to the school and kids are sharing. So the quieter kids don't have access to these things. In our classes, every child has access to a tool. Everybody's using it. So that, I think, is part of the reason why they seem to grow up more quickly in terms of confidence and self-reliance.
Earlier, you talked about how we are in a new era of AI, chat GPT, anything robotics, machine learning. How big of an impact do you think you are having on these kids, and how important are these skills to the young people?
I see the transformation in them when they realize that they have control. After making the coding commands, when the robots actually are responding to what they have coded, that breaks something in them. So immediately, as a teacher, as a coach, I see the change. I see the way they become more vocal and more active. The more robotics classes they go to, it makes them stronger and more vocal. So they're able to speak up, and that's what the African kid needs. They should be able to use their voice, and they should be able to communicate freely, no matter where they are.
I think we are having internet issues on that note. Thank you so much for your time.
I'm grateful.
Salma Tego is the founder and CEO of the Children's Learn and Play Center in Accra, Ghana. That's today's Tech Report. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Paul. Be sure to join Paul Ndiho's Technology Reports every Wednesday on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.